I am so thrilled to welcome and introduce Dr. Greg Manning, who is one of our consultants for the National Center for Adoption and Permanency. And actually, do you want to be known as Greg or Gregory?
Greg's fine, unless I'm in trouble, then Gregory usually jumps in. But Greg, I prefer going by Greg. So thank you, Sharon.
Okay, good. I just thought I would check it out because I know names are important for all of us.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes. So nobody really knows very much about you. I feel like I've known you a long time, but I don't know a whole lot about you.
Sure.
So I'm looking forward to the interview. And very often when somebody introduces me at some kind of an event, they choose what they want to say out of my resume. And frequently I'd like to be able to, as my father would say, put the emphasis on the other syllable.
Right.
So, what would you like people to know? Maybe five things
Sure.
about who you are. And we'll start with that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation. And I do agree. It's always nice to be able to kind of like set our story, right? Just like with the youth and family that we work with, kind of really hearing their stories versus what we assume, right? And so I think first and foremost, I bring a doctorate level education as a clinical psychologist and been working in the field for the better part of 3 decades now. And I think the interesting about it though is that I've not had the personal experience. I don't have that lived, like what they call lived expertise. And yet I see that as a gift because it forces me not to say that, oh, I'm Dr. Manning, so I know everything, right? I happen to have a lot of education and training and experience, but I don't have that lived experience. So it forces me to remain humble and welcoming. And so that I think that's kind of like the bedrock, the foundation for where and I think one of my favorite lines when someone says, "So what should I do, Dr. Manning?" I'm like, "I don't know." and they're like, "Well, wait, you're a doctor." I'm like, "Yes, but it's your experience, right? I would give you." And so that's kind of like the really what I like to start with I mean, I have a lot of ideas and thoughts, but really, I just embrace the coach perspective, like that. So, but I think the other thing that I like to bring to the table is I keep really busy. I wear lots of hats. Although not today, and you have a wonderful hat on, Sharon. But
Thank you.
I wear lots of those hats. So I train, I teach, I mentor, I supervise. I work in the government, as well. And so I think it allows me to see things from a lot of different perspectives, right? I just don't see it as a lens from as a psychologist or as a one thing.
You're kind of like a busy bee pollinating environments.
I do, I know, and that's really I love that because it all allows me to be interested in a lot of different things and bring different perspectives, and also forces me to be a lifelong learner. That's another thing that I bring to it. I just went back to graduate school for a certificate program this past calendar year, and it's the first time I'd been in school for like almost 25 years. I'm like, and but it was such a blessing to like suddenly rekindle that student experience, right? And so that was another thing that I did. And because I like also not just bringing the clinical side, but also the certificate program was in business administration. So I can bring that business side to our work. And child welfare, as you know, is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise.
Yes.
And if we truly want to bring change, and like we've talked about at NCAP, we have to understand the business side of it, because there's billions of dollars out there, and where the money goes is what happens, right? And so I think I like to bring that perspective. It's not always the most popular perspective to bring into the equation, but I think we have to know it.
Yes.
Because the people, especially the jurisdictions we serve, they're driven by it, right? I mean, and they're held accountable. And that's how the state and the federal governments, that's how they hold the hook over people, right?
Yes.
Through the funding. So
when I tell people that foster care is a $9 billion business,
yeah,
they kind of do. So you're right. More understanding of that if we want to change things.
Right, absolutely. And I think the most fulfilling thing for me professionally is when I see myself putting people in the right positions with the right skills to make their best decision. And I just like that because it's like a coordinator. We just had the Super Bowl yesterday, right? and like I like that coordinate because I never really had the talent on the field in whatever sports I played. And the same thing, I don't have that lived experience or expertise. So my gift is that I can help put people in the right positions to do the best things that they choose, right? And that's kind of like probably the things that I like to bring to the table beyond just, what the little line items are in my resume.
That's pretty powerful stuff and a great introduction. And it gives us a good sense of your personality and what's important, for you. I guess I'd like to know what it is about child welfare that drew you in. I mean, there's so many different ways that a psychologist can go. What was it about child welfare?
Interesting. Part of it was initially out of necessity, right? I mean, I graduated I was in grad school and I wasn't able to fund it all. So, I had some of those loans that were sitting out there and I was interviewing for positions and I found a position in Los Angeles County in a community nonprofit, the Help Group, which still is around today. And I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I interviewed for the position and it was something that drew me, was just intriguing to me, right? And so when I met the youth, that's when it really hooked me, And I remember one of my first experiences was I was walking, and they had an on-site school, so their kids were playing basketball, and I just like, wow, I get to play sports with these kids, and we just connected over that, and then suddenly I saw these young people as real people, as not just foster youth or and they're just kids, and it just drew me in, and it kept me sustained because obviously, as you know, that means a lot of challenges in child welfare. But it just lit up, that light bulb, and it's hard to explain, but and the light bulb has never burned out, thankfully. So
yeah, once you get hooked, it's really hard to unhook yourself from this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, aside from your professional life, what else kind of keeps you going? What do you love outside of the work that you do?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sharon, especially as you know, in child welfare, it can be very draining, right? And very challenging. And so, how do we flip off that switch and just be our real person? I mean, first and foremost, just like, I start with my own family. Like, my parents are still around and I'm thankfully close to them and supporting them, and then, but also I'm married 25 years. My wife and I have 4 children. One just graduated from college, so yay, one down. One's a freshman, and then 2 are high school seniors. So we're all in that kind of like that nexus of education and career. And so,
are they twins?
Yeah, there are twin boys. Yeah, identical twin boys. In very different directions. They're charting very different paths. So, I think that's kept me kind of grounded, and also it forced me, like when I come home, I've got to lean into them, right? I can't bring work home, so that's a real gift. One thing that's totally different than child welfare is I'm a baseball umpire. I do youth and high school baseball. I loved baseball as a kid. I still love it as a fan now. Never was good enough to make it anywhere really, not even in high school. And yet it's just something that's fun. I enjoy it, and like in work, as long as the adults behave themselves, it's great, because the kids are always great. And so that's kind of a fun, thing for me. I also enjoy gardening. Really, I have a vegetable garden, and what I enjoy that. I have an orange tree that I maintain, and which brings, fresh orange juice, which is so much better than the store-bought stuff. And that just allows me to get out there in nature. I put my music on and I just listen, right? It helps me unplug. I can't check my phone. I can't check my email. And it just allows me to be, back, connected, and which I think is so important for, our work, and and stuff like that. Do a little home improvement here and there, not enough to open up walls and everything, but just to, fix things and do little projects here and there. It's, again, something I developed from my dad, something that we used to go out in the garage, and disappear for probably longer than my mom wanted us to. But, I'm always out there. And then lastly, just kind of like volunteering, like with our church and with our community. And I think that's just a way to give back, as well, which is something I try and bring into my work too, as well. So it's
You know what? You're a nurturer to the core.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, whether you're nurturing the soil or
Yeah.
a tree or your family or your church,
Yeah.
that's if we were going to label you, we
Yeah.
would say a grand nurturer.
I like that. And I think that really, because we invest so much into this work that we really need that, right? And the return on our investment, as well. I mean, we even just adopted a dog from the shelter, and it's amazing it's a real parallel for our youth. I mean, much more so than our other adoptee dogs, because this one has no doubt had a rough childhood. And so it's a gift. We've had him for 5 months, and you see that attachment, you see that bonding. I mean, I feel like I'm doing the adoption, the ACT training with my dog, which is great, because I see it, and it also reinstills my hope that, look, if he can change, anybody can, given the right environment. So,
Well, we all heal within the family context. And so,
absolutely,
yeah, you're really showing that. Zeroing in for a minute,
yeah.
what specific part of your work is a focus that really gives you something it's kind of profound, the outcomes that you see?
Yeah.
You've got this broad experience that you're playing in many different places. But when we come down to the work that you do for adoption, foster care, and kinship, if you focused in, what would you like to say about that? What are some of the outcomes and lessons that you've learned that you'd like to pass along to others that are watching the interview?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sharon. I think first and foremost, I believe in the goodness in people. I firmly believe that people make the best decisions they can with the information and skills they have accessible at that moment in time.
Mm.
And I think, and that moment in time is the critical piece, because, I mean, even like when I'm umpiring, I kicked a call the other day because I wasn't prepared and I was not in the right spot.
Mm.
And then I realized, hey, if I was in a better spot with better focus, I would have made a better decision, right? And so I think that's really what I want to bring, is belief in the goodness in people. Because, when you look at the court report, that's just one perspective, but that doesn't tell the whole picture. Even like, look at the way we started the interview. My resume tells one image of me, right? But it doesn't say everything. It doesn't give the context behind it, right? And so that's probably one of the big things, is belief in that, no matter what they've done, right? Because in the end, like, that's how the child came into the world, is from their parents. Whether, and so it's, that's who we work. Because I remember when I first started, I made some mistakes, right? Because that parent, I made some comment and the kid was devastated because I made this negative comment about their parent, and they said, and I think that really sit with me, and I think that's probably one thing that comes up. I think a second thing is just being honest. I think because a lot of times some of the news we deliver isn't great news, and yet we have to deliver it with compassion, but also with authenticity. Be authentic. And I remember back to the group home when I started, and I had a child who we had to say that his visit was not going to happen, and that he wasn't going to make his level at the group home because of his behavior. And I didn't want to say it to him that day because, and because I was on call that night and I didn't want to get have it all set up. And so I said, oh, well, I don't know, we'll discuss it tomorrow. He's like, Dr. Manning, because he read me. And that's the thing, like, our kids know, our kids and families know whether, and I'm like, you're right, you're not going to make it. It's like, okay. That was it. And it was a quiet night. And it really taught me, Greg, just be authentic and truthful with them. And if they disagree with me, that's fine. Right. I mean, and then so I was like, this is my perspective. This is what I thought, and I think that's one thing, is just, being truthful. And the last thing is, and I can't remember where it came up with, the idea of condone and condemn. And I think because we see so much behavior and functioning that is really challenging and obviously devastating to people, whether it be abuse or neglect and trauma. And so no matter what's happened, I can't condone that kind of action. No matter what's happened to you, that doesn't give you the right to, take it out on somebody else or draw revenge. So I can't condone that. But what I've learned is that I have to be important, and I have to really focus on not condemning the individual. So I don't condone their
behavior and not the person, huh?
but I don't condemn the person.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a delicate balance to strike sometimes and to maintain, because it's like, I'm not saying what they did was okay, but I'm not saying that they're not okay. Because I think in different situations, if different things played out in my life, I could have made some really bad decisions with some really bad outcomes. And so I really hooked on to that idea of condone and condemn, and because it allows us to give us something to work on, which is the behavior, the functioning, but it still allows us to maintain the relationship with the person, because I don't condemn them, and that gives them the chance to stay with me.
Yeah.
And because if I lose them, then I lose all chance of help, of nurturing, like we talked about. And so that's kind of where those are kind of like my 3 pillars, if you will, in terms of that. So
that's really wonderful information. And I think those are 3 things that people are basically good, and you can not like the action, but continue to care for the person so that they can stay engaged with you. I mean, I think those things are so important. So thank you, really. I think they're good lessons for people that are tuning in on this. At some point, at some point, your nurturing on this plane is going to end. And I know you have, strong religious base in your life and with your family. So when they're eulogizing you or they're doing your tombstone, what would you like people who are maybe passing by and overhearing or reading to know about you? Here lies Greg Manning, and what?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, really reflecting on what's important. I think it's really, Greg helped put people in the right places with the right skills to make meaningful outcomes in their life.
Wow. Okay.
And I think no matter what that is, and I think what's really important, it's their meaningful result. It's not what I want. Even like for my children, like there may be things that I would want them to do, but it's not that, like, so can I help them to be in the right place with the right skills, to make something meaningful? Because that's the ultimate pay it forward. I know in your life people have done that, in my life people have done that. And so like I can't stop that flow, because if it stops with me, then all that is for naught, right? And so that's probably what my ultimate takeaway, I think, would be what I'd like people to remember me.
Thank you. That's really lovely. You've come on as a consultant to NCAP. What is it about the organization and their goals that draws you and makes you want to support what they're doing?
I think first and foremost, Sharon, it starts with the people, right? It starts with the people, and because you can have the greatest mission, you can have the greatest objectives and the greatest looking text and all that stuff, but if the people aren't right, then you just got to go, right? And so that's what ultimately brought me into was the relationships, right? And I think that's fundamentally what matters. But I really embrace, especially the idea that it's family success that matters. It's not the number of kids in care or not in care or time to reunification or whatever. Those are all just numbers. But fundamentally, what does success mean? And I think, and that's really where it forces us and gives us the opportunity to embrace how did the family define success? Because like everyone doesn't have to go to college. That doesn't mean success, but everyone should have something meaningful doing that they do in life. And what is that? And I think that's what really is important, that and I think, and also when we think of success, is like relationships. Everyone doesn't have to have a kid in their house to be successful. I mean, there's countless people in my life who I've never lived with who are very important to me. And I think that's what we need to figure out, is who's important to these people, to our families that we serve, and then also force control and support and whatever the various jurisdictions doing their work to like really say, stop and wait a minute. I mean, I remember when we were doing family finding with in the county that I work in, we were making these recommendations for this one child, and the consultant we brought in was like, I was saying, I don't think they're ready to see their mom because things are not really stable. The kid was doing all this dangerous behavior, and she's like, hold on, Greg, wait a minute. Imagine that instead of this girl that you're making that recommendation about, what if I made that recommendation for your daughter, that your daughter was struggling, and until she stabilized, she couldn't see you. And I can remember, I've been in thousands of meetings like you have. This was like years ago. I remember the exact seat and room I was in.
Wow.
I was like, well, there's no way that I would allow you to step between me and my daughter. And she's like, well, then why is it different for her? I'm like, yes, because that was success for her, was just to meet her mom. It wasn't about living with her, it's like, I need to know my mom. And I think that's what NCAP provides us with, is the platform with the diverse skill set of all of us here, is to bring about that change so that that girl doesn't have her success barrier. You have a barrier. So I think that's what NCAP can do, is lower that barrier across our system of care for families achieving success on their terms.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So.
Oh, that's so beautifully said, because we're always saying, what do you mean a family success model? Well, certainly what you're saying is that's different with every individual person and family system. And we have to let them dictate success.
Right. Especially with the various cultures and everything that's coming on. Like, I don't have the same success formula that our neighbors do. But that doesn't make mine better or worse. It just makes it different, and we should honor that.
So in the final couple minutes here of our interview, is there anything that I haven't asked you about, or anything that's on your mind that you would like to say?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that I think what's important in our work is that we value everyone who comes to the table. And I think too often we look at their resume, like, and like what's on their resume, how many degrees do they have and how much experience. And we forget that that's not what matters. What matters is like who's important for these people, right? And I think of the people, like when some of the youth I've worked with, like the janitor, the custodians, sometimes that's the most incredible person on the world for this youth. We bring them onto the team. Why? Not that they're going to live with a custodian, because that custodian, when that kid runs out of class, that's where he goes. And I think even like the child, the staff that the child was in 15 years ago, they remembered that staff. Like, bring that person on. And I think that's what we really are missing sometimes, is that we judge people based on what we think they can bring to the table. And I think really the best thing is, that's why even though you start out, doctor, look, Greg is fine. Like, I already know I have a doctorate. I don't need families to call me Dr. Manning. Some people still do. That's fine. Greg is who I am, right? And I don't want you to think anything different of me just because I have a degree, right? Or 30 years of experience or whatever. And I think that's what I think we really need to stress, is that our families know what's best for them. We just need to help reduce the barriers, whether they be from funding or access or services or support. But most importantly, we just need to provide them with opportunity for healthy relationships. Yeah. And when we do that, everything else falls into place. All of our lives fall into place because of the relationships, not because what we do or what we know or what. It's all about that. So why would it be any different for our families? So that's what it's really all about. So
Beautifully said. Really. Thank you. Absolutely. This was such a lovely interchange, and I really thank you very much for the time.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
Thank you
know.
so much, Sharon. It's great to reconnect with you. I still remember the first time we met at Kinship, down at Brook Hollow Drive. I still remember. I could go back to that room too. I'm not sure the building's still standing, but yeah. And that's what matters, though, right? I mean, our relationship over all these years matters.
Yes.
And I just love the fact that through NCAP we can bring that to people across the country. So
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
awesome. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. And have a great rest of the day and week.
Absolutely. You as well, Sharon. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.